Hello everyone and welcome to the build video of the Beat1Lab Moto EP1 Motorcycle. While we are not new to RC motorcycles, this is the first of its kind as far as a build, action, and review video on the channel. Before we get started, let's go over the items and tools you will need to complete this kit. All of these items are laid out on page 3 of the manual. We will need a full electronic setup: radio, servo, ESC, motor, and battery. For tools, you will see we will need a pair of pliers, scissors, and a couple hex drivers. More importantly though, is a good Phillips screwdriver, since 95% of the fasteners in this kit are Phillips screws. Okay, let's get started. We'll be working on bag A first, so go ahead and get that bag opened up and all the parts sorted. Here's our first look at the long list of Phillips screws. Most use a coarse thread, so make sure you don't over tighten these. A good snug is all it takes. The rear tire is made from a soft compound, so getting it stretched over the rear wheel is pretty easy. Okay, our first hurdle. The axle is slightly oversized and was very difficult to get the bearings over. To make installation easier, we sanded down the axle slightly until the bearings slid into place. This assembly was a little tricky, but take your time. 1 or 2 attempts and you'll see how it all goes together. Pay close attention to the lower guard and how the chain installs. It's really easy to get this wrong. The chain should look like this when the assembly is complete. As mentioned in the unboxing video, the Moto EP1 comes with a few hop-up parts right in the box, the first being the triple clamp. Go ahead and move the plastic pieces to the side, we're going aluminum. The manual doesn't take into account the hop-ups, so just follow along with the video install to get things assembled. Since the steering ball doesn't lock into place, we used an extra bit of thread locker to help keep it in place. Alright, our first mistake. We installed the steering assembly upside down and didn't notice it until later in the build. Way later. Don't make this mistake. Make sure it is installed correctly. While not 100% necessary, we made sure the cross tubing was cut flat on both ends. The manual also states to install the metal tube in step number 5. Since this isn't used until later in the build, and to help keep it from constantly falling out, we left it out for now. Since there wasn't any indication of what type of fluid to put in the front forks, we're starting with 1000 weight diff fluid. This should help with damping, however we will most likely be changing it out after the first run. The front tire is molded from a much harder compound and will take a little more muscle to get it mounted. It was definitely a process, so we had to do it off camera. Note the flat spots on the front axle. You'll want to make sure those are facing down when installing. Also, the rubber pieces that go between the fork and the wheel assembly are different lengths. We're not sure why, other than maybe an offset, but make sure you install the longer one on the right side, the shorter one on the left. Here's where those flat spots on the front axle come into play. Make sure the set screws hit those flat spots. We also suggest not tightening them down all the way just yet. Let the front axle float left to right just slightly. The faux brake system will center that front axle. After you have both sides installed, you can tighten down the lower set screws. We're going to be installing a high-tech D625MW servo into the Moto EP1. It's a great all-around servo that will be perfect for this two-wheeler. And because we're performance nuts, we're going to build the Moto EP1 with the stock plastic-bodied steering damper first. We'll swap it out later to the upgrade unit to see what performance advantage we can get. Make sure the two red O-rings seat into the groove in the damper cap. Feed the shock shaft through the damper slowly so you don't rip the O-rings. Boom! CompetitionX ball cup tool works its magic once again. Link for this awesome tool is in the description. Choose the horn that matches your servo. The tooth count is printed on a flat spot on the horn. Don't over-tighten this screw. You want the horn to flop freely with as little play as possible. Yep, I know. I still haven't figured out that the steering assembly mount is upside down. Don't tighten this set screw down all the way just yet. We need to make a little adjustment prior to doing so. We went ahead and locked the slipper clutch down all the way. We can make adjustments to it prior to running. Now that the slipper side is assembled, you can loosen the set screw and reposition to allow a little bit of play between the sprocket and the bearing. This relieves a little bit of the stress on the bearing. Don't tighten down these screws all the way just yet. We'll use them to adjust the tension in the drive chain. The last screw is a little tricky to get to, but if you feed it through one of the larger holes in the spur gear, it goes right in. Now we can install the chassis mount barrel that we left out from way early on in the build. And it was at this point we figured out the servo mount was upside down. All fixed. We're not quite sure what the three positions here do, but for now, go ahead and mount it in the center hole. The center mounting hole in the piston was a bit small. The screw wouldn't fit. We opened up the hole with a 2mm drill bit and the screw fit like a glove. There's that CompetitionX ball-in tool again. Man, that's one handy tool. 12mm is a good place to start. You'll use this though to set the final ride height on the bike. If you feel like the shock length is really long for such a short throw, you'd be right. We're curious how this is going to work once we start running it. Attaching the rear fork took a few tries. Just have patience with it. We also found mounting to the small sprocket first was the easiest way to get the chain on. We're not going to show the full electronics install. It might vary depending on what setup you use. We are, however, going to be using a full Reedy setup, 600Z ESC and 13.5 turn motor. Here's our final electronics install, ESC in front of the motor and receiver up on the seat. We'll tidy up the wiring here in a few. We just wanted to give you a general idea of how the electronics mount up. Because of the size of the two cross members, the front bodywork wouldn't mount up correctly. To remedy, we had to shave down the support a bit to clear the cross members. Since the power and sensor wires on the brushless motor protrude a bit, we found it easier to attach the right side of the bodywork first. This holds the bodywork in place and allows us to work the left side into place much easier. The lower bodywork box slips and slides into place. Note that the front body clip is a pretty tight fit. We had to do it off camera to get a little leverage to install. The black paint on the rider figure is not the greatest. In fact, most of the black on his hands rubbed off while inserting the grips. We'll probably repaint prior to running it. To attach the rider assembly, slip the hook into the groove and slide into place. Pretty simple, actually. The bike stand is all that's left, and you're done with the Beat1Lab Moto EP1 Motorcycle. This has been a fun build, and we're really excited to get the bike out and into the wild. We have a few visual tweaks we want to do prior to running it, so stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and hit the bell icon to keep informed of future videos on the channel. It really helps us out. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.